ReZero, Volume 1, Chapter 3, Ending and Beginning. Hey man, don't just stare off into space like that. You want an apple? As soon as Subaru's consciousness had returned to him, there was a ripe red fruit in front of his face. It looked just like an apple, and as he stared at it, the phrase, fruit of knowledge, crossed the back of his mind. It was that forbidden fruit that, when eaten, resulted in expulsion from paradise. If Subaru ate that fruit now, would it save him from the inexplicable situation he found himself in? Hey kiddo, said a middle-aged man as he furrowed his brow and called out to Subaru, who was being completely unresponsive. Subaru slowly drifted from the vague edge of his consciousness back towards reality, and when he was back, he suddenly raised his head. He looked this way and that, his heart beating ferociously and his breathing ragged. He was in front of the fruit store on the main street, just past noon. There were various colorful vegetables and fruits laid out, and the person standing in front of those goods was a stern-looking man, the shop owner with the white scar across his face. This was the crowded street that Subaru had already seen several times before. He scratched his head. "I just don't get it," he muttered, and then, overcome with dizziness and nausea, he collapsed on the spot. As he felt a cold rush of water on his face, Subaru was somehow able to bring his muddied consciousness back to reality. Subaru looked at the empty water jug the fruit shop owner had brought Subaru. After Subaru had collapsed in front of his shop, the owner had helped him get himself together. Subaru was glad that the owner had the heart to worry about him, but the fact that he was so kind as to not ask where Satella had gone struck a deep wound in his heart. As Subaru sat on the earthen floor, he wiped away the water from his bangs and clenched his teeth. The glint of that blade still haunted the back of his mind, along with that terrible smile as it danced through the stench of blood. The back of Subaru's throat twitched, and he sat, hugging his knees. He couldn't keep his entire body from shaking. He'd lived a completely normal life up until this point. He'd never experienced so much fear, so much despair. He didn't want to think anymore. He didn't want to remember anymore. He wanted to draw back inside his shell and forget everything. The glimmer of the blade, the arm flying off, the scream, sinking in a sea of blood, that silver hair. The less Subaru wanted to think about it, the more clearly his memories came back to him. Overcome by anguish, Subaru raised his face up to scream, but just as he was about to let everything out... The voice that had risen up inside Subaru dribbled out, full of doubt, and he just stared, dumbfounded. In Subaru's range of vision, with his eyes open wide, he could see a tall figure with skin like a reptile. A beast-like humanoid that was only as tall as his waist. A young dancer with pink hair. A swordsman with 6 swords at his waist. And a young girl in a white robe with silver hair that swayed as she walked. Those violet eyes of hers took one glance at Subaru as she walked by, but she looked away as though uninterested and walked on. Those amethyst eyes of hers, full of determination, just looked straight forwards as she stared down the road. In that gallant stance, that delicate beauty, in that girl that Subaru had been searching for, there was no change. Unable to call out immediately, with rasping breath, Subaru struggled to his feet and chased after her. "Wait! Wait up! Wait up! Please wait!" For an instant, the girl reacted to his voice and looked back at Subaru with a cold gaze, as if she was looking at a stranger. Subaru felt his heart gouged by the chill in her sharp gaze. He had not done what she had asked of him. He had hurt her. He hadn't apologized yet. There was no way he could be forgiven, but even so, Subaru chased after her. He didn't know how she felt. At the very least, he had to know what she was thinking. If he was going to let what he imagined her to be thinking hurt him, he would rather be hurt by the real her, here in this reality where he could feel pain. "Wait, please! Satella!" He wasn't sure of what he wanted to say to her if he could catch her, But when the answer to that question became clear in his mind, Subaru called out Satella's name as if he had just remembered it. Finally, it seemed as if his voice had reached her, because just as she was starting to get away from him, the girl stopped immediately in her tracks. Subaru weaved through the crowd to catch up to her and put his hand on her thin shoulder. "Don't ignore me. It's my fault that I went away, and it's my fault for not listening to you, but I've been desperate. After what happened, I went to the loot cellar, but I wasn't able to meet you there, and..." As Subaru grabbed her shoulder, Satella looked at him in surprise. As she turned around and Subaru opened his mouth, what came out was a sort of self-defense that sounded full of excuses. What made him realize that was Satella's clear eyes. Her stare was emotionless. As Subaru faced it, he still felt a sense of ease. As far as he could tell, Satella didn't appear to be wounded. Subaru experienced this as salvation. "I'm sorry for going on about myself. I'm so glad to see you're okay." The fact that they were able to meet again made Subaru feel simple happiness. There were so many things that they had to talk about, but before any of that, Subaru felt as if nothing he had done was in vain. He was finally and profoundly relieved. "What do you think you're doing?" But as Subaru found this sense of ease, Satella was incredibly angry. Her white cheeks had reddened, and she twisted her body to get Subaru's hand off her shoulder. After taking a step back and putting some space between her and Subaru, Satella's eyes were filled with hostility. After this unexpectedly stern reaction, Subaru unconsciously gulped. Still, this reaction made sense. From Satella's perspective, he should be shocked that Subaru would even show his face in front of her. There was no insult too great for her to lob at Subaru, and, "I don't know who you are, but what the hell are you thinking, calling someone the same name as that witch of jealousy?" After hearing that reaction, which was beyond anything that he could have imagined, everything that Subaru had built up to brace himself was smashed to pieces. Faced with those unexpected words, Subaru felt as if time had stopped. The sound of the crowd disappeared. All that Subaru could hear was the violent beating of his heart and the rough breathing of the silver-haired girl in front of him. Tense and defensive, he felt as if all of the other sounds had disappeared. But that was no illusion. What? As Subaru looked around, he realized that everyone all around this crowd, shopping district, and all the pedestrians on the roads were staring at them. Everyone looked shaken, and no one would move a single muscle, stock still and quiet. It was as if the conversation between Satella and Subaru had taken control of the entire area. With her severe stare, Satella was waiting for Subaru's answer. However, unsure of what he was guilty of, Subaru couldn't think of how to answer. The reason why Subaru thought Satella would be upset and the real reason she was upset were different. "I'll ask you one more time. Why are you calling me by the Witch of Jealousy's name?" "What do you mean? That's what I was told to call you." "I don't know who told you that, but whoever it was, that's in incredibly poor taste. Even if you're not the one who thought of it, it's bad enough that you agreed. This is the Witch of Jealousy we're talking about, the embodiment of all things taboo. Most people would hesitate to even utter such a name, and you're using it to name me?" With her anger displayed for all to see, Satella, the silver-haired girl, threw Subaru into a storm of confusion. Everyone else around seemed to be nodding, agreeing with her, and that, more than anything else, proved that she was right. Subaru had absolutely no idea what was going on. He couldn't understand what she was saying. Subaru had only just called her by her name. But Satella had rebuked him, and everyone around agreed that she was in the right. "If that's all you want to say, then I'll be on my way. I don't have time to deal with you." The girl looked on as Subaru simply stood there where he was, hanging his head. She then turned and walked off, her hair dancing behind her, having nothing more to do with him. Subaru thought to call after her and started to shout her name, but it got caught in his throat as if it had frozen shut. If Subaru called her name again, he would simply be making the same mistake twice. But then, what should he call her? He hesitated, unable to decide what to do. Subaru gasped. On the canvas top of a cart on the side of the street, from a position just a head taller than Subaru, something leaped. A small body was pulled by gravity towards the ground, and as soon as it landed, it took off on the wind. That little gust of wind, with dirty clothes and blonde hair trailing behind it, wove through the crowd with a godlike dexterity, and from it an outstretched arm slipped into a certain girl's hawk-embroidered white robe. The two only touched for an instant, but to that little gust of wind, that moment was enough. The wind made the robe fly up, and the girl with the robe twisted around. The wind took off flying again. "It can't be!" The silver-haired girl raised her voice in shock and stuck her hand into her robe. She couldn't find what she was looking for, and with her eyes open wide, she looked in the direction of the quickly fleeing wind. Seeing the dragon-adored badge in the wind's hand as it passed by, Subaru yelled, "Felt?" With Subaru's call, the wind waved for a moment in hesitation, but without slowing down, it quickly flew down a narrow alley. Everything happened so incredibly fast that Subaru could only see for an instant what happened. But that had to be... "I've been had. Is that why you stopped me? Are you two working together?" moaned the girl as she looked at Subaru standing still. The girl quickly turned her palm towards Subaru, but apparently changing her mind, she ran off in the direction the wind had gone down the alley. "Hey, wait! This is a misunderstanding! Subaru took off after them down the alley, hoping to sort things out. As he ran, his mind was filled with questions and doubts. There was too much information to process, and his panicked mind couldn't deal with it. Even without that, he had just gone through death twice, and everything in his mind was muddled. "There's got to be someone out there who'll be nice to me! Why the hell was I even summoned here?" Subaru yelled, having had enough with nothing making sense, and he kept running with unsure footing down the dark alley. Subaru wasn't sure of his stamina, but at a short distance he didn't think he would lose the two girls. However... Damn! A wall? Subaru spat. Right in front of him was a dead end. Neither of the two girls was there. Felt probably could easily climb over a wall like that, and he thought Satella would have been able to do something about it with her magic. "I could try to climb over to the other side, but I don't think I'd be able to catch up to them." Subaru couldn't afford to waste time here. He had no idea how to get around the capital, so if he'd lost them here, it would be impossible for him to catch up to them. Then should I head to the loot cellar? If Satella and Feld are alive, then Rom must be... Even if Subaru said this, he felt that several things were wrong and contradicting themselves. Feld had been cut down. Rom's neck was slit. Satella fell in a pool of blood. Subaru had his abdomen cut open. Twice. How was it that everyone was alive? No, now's not the time. I can't waste time thinking. Right now I've gotta... Subaru would go on ahead and quickly meet up with Rom. That was what Subaru had to do. He could think later. The best thing for him to do right now was to leave this alley and head for the slums. Subaru turned around. "You've gotta be kidding me!" Right in front of him, blocking the entrance to the alley, were three shadows. 3 people, with dirty clothes and a rough and barbaric appearance. 3 thugs who used these alleys as their hunting grounds. It was Subaru's 3rd time encountering them that day. "Give it a rest already! Just what is it gonna take for you punks to learn?" Tired of seeing those 3 thugs again, Subaru furiously stomped on the ground. This was the 3rd time they had met. Every time was in a back alley, 3 against 1. Given how their first and second efforts were fruitless, Subaru was stunned that they were so determined to catch him that they'd try a 3rd time. "I don't have the time or the patience to deal with you fools. Out of my way! Now!" The current situation had really put Subaru out of sorts, but there was also the fact that, given what happened last time, he thought he should be able to scare them if he shouted. At least that's what he thought. "Get out of my way," he says. "Ha! I don't like your attitude. You don't get it, do you? You're not in a position to be ordering us around." "It was a 3-on-1 last time, and you guys still lost. Like you were nothing. You think you can talk big like that? Even sore losers show more shame when they wail. However, the thugs didn't seem to fear Subaru at all and kept up their taunting. Subaru bit his lip at their unexpected reactions. Even small-time villains like this had a sense of pride, he thought. He wanted to avoid wasting any more time and risk losing Felt and Satella. Also, given the risk that a fight would entail, Subaru decided that he should deal with this peacefully. Fine. Have it your way. I'll give you everything I've got. That's what you want from me, right? Subaru held back his irritation and raised both of his hands in the air, showing that he was giving up. The thugs all looked at one another after Subaru changed his attitude, and then all burst into laughter. What's that? If you were that scared, you should have just said so. Look at this guy. Don't talk big if you're just gonna bend over. Whatever. If he's gonna do as we say, that just makes it easier on us, right? What a coward, huh? Subaru was irritated, but he just laughed it off. He decided to name the group of thugs Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest to make himself feel better, and muttered under his breath so they wouldn't hear. Once I made it back up with Satella, I'm gonna borrow Puck and make them pay. Just as Subaru was about to lay out all that he owed in front of him, he froze. Huh? Out of everything that had happened since Subaru had arrived in this new world, this was the most unsettling. Why? At Subaru's fingertips, inside his plastic convenience store bag, was a bag of crispy snacks, corn soup flavored. They were one of his favorites, and he had grabbed them on a whim at the store to eat in place of his dinner. When Subaru was with Ram at the loot cellar, he had shown them off to him as a great late-night snack, an act that he had later regretted. However, that bag was still there, as full and sealed as when he had bought it at the store. I shouldn't have these anymore. Ram ate them all, and I complained, and there weren't any left. I'm sure of it. Why were there snacks in the bag? There was no trace that it had been opened. It wasn't possible. Subaru felt his thoughts blocked on all sides. However, in that locked state, Subaru still came to a conclusion about what was happening. Even though he had come to a conclusion, it wasn't doing him any good. As soon as it occurred to him, he rejected it as impossible. His sense of reason denied the possibility. Hey, what are you doing? What? Subaru suddenly heard a voice right next to him. Cut from his train of thought, that was the only way he could react. It was one of the thugs, the smallest one, the one Subaru had just named Dumbest. While Subaru was lost in thought, Dumbest had walked over and put his hand on Subaru's shoulder. Subaru twisted and pushed his hand away. Out of my way. What'd you say? In every sense of the word, I've run out of time to deal with you guys. I've gotta check something. Are you kidding me? As Subaru pushed Dumbest aside and moved to exit the alley, the other two stood angrily in his way. Get out of my way! I've got somewhere to be! He had had to rule out this unbelievably stupid, unthinkable theory. Faced with Subaru's yell, the men hesitated a bit. If he could break through and get onto the main street, he would probably be out of harm's way. After deciding that, Subaru stepped down to kick firmly off the ground. However, just as Subaru put his foot down, it twisted. The strength drained from his legs, and he fell to his knees. He put out his hands to catch his fall, and cursed his idiocy for stumbling at such a critical moment. Huh. That's strange. Just as Subaru tried to push against the ground so he could stand back up again, his arm started shaking. He didn't think he could stand back up again. He didn't think he could even lift his body. Well, I've done it now, haven't I? Subaru looked back as he heard that voice tinged with anxiety, and then he realized what had happened. A knife was sticking out of his back. As soon as Subaru was conscious of it, an unbearable pain swept through him. He choked. It was a natural reaction to the searing agony. I've been stabbed, 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 I've been stabbed! Dumber, the one with the knife, had struck first. Subaru didn't notice as he drew his weapon, and just as Subaru was trying to push past him, he was stabbed in the back. The pain was the same kind of torture that he had experienced in the past few hours, but no matter how many times he experienced it, he didn't think it was possible to ever get used to.
What? You really stabbed him? I didn't have a choice. What do you think would happen if he'd escaped onto the street? Just what do you think we'd have to deal with if he did?
Wait, don't do that, you idiot! Yes, this is bad. His guts are damaged. He's gonna die. The giant, dumb, turned Subaru's body over, and as he did, the knife was pushed deeper into his back. Still greater suffering was piled on top of Subaru's existing pain, and even Subaru's death throes were kept from leaving his throat. Subaru couldn't call for help or scream out in anger. There was nothing left for him to do. He just repeated his irregular breaths, feeling as though he was going to drown in his own blood as it filled his throat. The feeling in Subaru's hands and feet started to leave him. His consciousness was flickering weakly, like a light about to go out. Again, his vision went dark. This was the end, just like last time. What do you mean, last time? Subaru thought to himself. The fact that he was now clinging to an idea that he had disregarded as stupid before just made him feel even more pitiful. But if he was going to cling to it, he might as well go all the way. Turn your thoughts away from dying. Before you die, figure out what's happening around you. Your eyes are dead. Your arms and legs are gone too. What you have left is your nose and your ears, and you better use them both to death. It doesn't matter what lingering scent I smell. It doesn't matter if all I hear are insults. I smell the mud of the road. I smell the iron life smell from the blood pouring from me. Now my nose is dead. It's dead. I doubt my ears will last much longer either. Take the valuables.
Here, the guards, they'll... No, if we caught out...
All I was able to pick up were those bits of conversation. That's great and all, but the part of my brain I need to figure out what that means is already dead. I'm dying, so I just listened. I don't know if I'll remember. What does it mean to remember? Why do I want to remember? What does it mean to want? Why... what? As Subaru's brain died, his other functions followed soon after. At the very end, with the faint sound of something being pulled from him, something scraping, Subaru lost his life a third time. When Subaru's consciousness awakened, he was in darkness, but realizing that it was a darkness of his own creation, he opened his closed eyelids. The bright sunlight burned his eyes. Subaru groaned a bit and put his hand over his eyes. So, kiddo, what about that apple? It was a question that Subaru had grown used to hearing, in a voice he had grown familiar with. That was lobbed at him. His ears were in perfect working order. The hustle and bustle of the main street was loud, and completely different from the silence that was around him just before the end. That was the way things were, despite the fact that, distance-wise, the silence was in an alley just one turn off the main street. Pretty pathetic that I couldn't even get more than one street away. The shop owner frowned at not getting an answer to his question. As Subaru saw the white scar being stretched across his face, he thought it made him look even more villainous. But Subaru knew that he was actually a really kind and thoughtful person who was obsessed with his kid. Of course, he probably didn't remember what Subaru did. Thinking of that, he turned once more to the scarred shop owner. How many times have you seen my face so far? What do you mean, how many times? I haven't seen you before in my life. The way you stand out, I don't think I'd forget you, and that awful expression you'd got if I'd seen you before. I didn't need to hear that last part about my expression, you know? Anyways, what's the date today? It's Tammuz the 14th. At this point, according to the calendar, it's halfway through the year. Huh. I see. Tammuz, huh? Subaru had no idea what the date was supposed to mean. To begin with, he had no idea how they fixed the calendar in this world. It was probably too much to expect that they went by a solar calendar, but he couldn't be sure. "So anyways, kiddo, how's about that apple?" The shop owner was patient as Subaru went silent, but for him to have to deal with someone this long just to buy a single apple? He seemed to be reaching his limit. His face was starting to twitch. Now this guy who didn't look all too great wearing a smile in the first place, when he was trying his best to smile, it was probably more of an effect of scaring customers away. And Subaru felt that whatever God put this man in this occupation was a cruel God indeed. As for Subaru's answer to the shop owner's question, he put his hand on his hip and proudly put out his chest. "I'm sorry, but I'm as broke as the sky is blue." "Then get the hell out of here!" The shop owner's yell was enough to throw Subaru back, and he scrambled out of there in a hurry. I can't really go back to that shop for a while, Subaru thought, with both meanings in his mind. Surprisingly, I thought this would be a two-part chapter, but it was a pretty short one. Thankfully, I forgot to say part 1 at the beginning, so all's well that ends well, I suppose. I'm glad he's finally figured out that it's a repeat. I mean, it's something that any reader or listener would immediately get. But it is reasonable to understand why he wouldn't believe such a thing. I mean, it's not often that somebody gets brought to another world after all. And even if one were to get brought to another world, reason has it that you would not immediately think, "Hey, I'm dying, and when I die, I get reset." Like, that's just not something that crosses your mind. Well, with that out of the way, thank you for listening to this chapter of ReZero, and I suppose I'll see you guys next time. Bye.